I'm so sorry, Furqan Sahab, I'm so sorry, I lost my connection. Can you hear me now clearly, Furqan Sahab?
Very clear.
Right. I apologize to everybody and to Furqan Sahab. I'm really sorry about this network issue that I'm facing right at the time when I should not face it, but I think it happens to all of us all the time. So, friends, a very good afternoon to all of you. To Furqan Qamar Sahab, thank you so much for doing this session for us. To all the very senior people in the university who have joined us from different departments and centers, I think the fact that we have everybody from the university attending this session tells us about the importance of this session, Furqan Sahab, and of course tells us also about the speaker that you are, that everybody wants to listen to you on this topic. Friends, this talk, of course, is of great relevance to all of us because obviously, as we know, the Academic Council has already adopted the new education policy, and it's a reality, and we all have to, in our own departments and centers, work out the modalities of implementing the NEP. But this particular program is being organized under the aegis of the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And as you all know, that at the university level, we have an Institutions Innovation Council, and this program is being organized under the aegis of Institutions Innovation Council. It mandates us to also look at the new education policy and the kind of avenues that it opens for us in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship. And when we were thinking about who to invite to speak on this particular important topic, there could not have been a better speaker than Furqan Sahab. And I was telling him that we are so lucky and fortunate in Jamia to have him with us, and he's so kind and generous with his time and scholarship, and he shares, so readily his time and scholarship with all of us at Jamia, and we make claims on his time also with some sort of a right over him. But we're very lucky. Friends, I don't think Professor Furqan Qamar really needs any introduction, but we also have some students who've joined us today. So for all of us, he's one of the tallest people in the university, but just to give you a certain sense of, his life's journey, Professor Furqan Qamar, of course, currently is the Professor of Management at the Center for Management Studies at Jamia Millia Islamia. He served as the Secretary General of the Association of Indian Universities, which is the largest and one of the oldest networks of universities in the world. In his illustrious career, of which one cannot speak enough, Professor Qamar has held the position of the Vice Chancellor of the University of Rajasthan and the Central University of Himachal Pradesh. He has also served as advisor on education in the Planning Commission of India. Essentially a professor of management, he has keen research interest in public policy, planning, administration and financing of higher education, and has numerous publications in journals of repute to his credit. Professor Qamar has chaired and has been a member of a large number of committees, working groups at the national and international level. Professor Qamar thus brings with him academic eminence, leadership qualities, and exposure to best global practices. And there could not have been a better speaker than him to speak on the new education policy. Professor Qamar, I thank you profusely, and it's really an honor and a privilege for us to get to hear you speak today. Over to you, Professor Qamar.
So thank you very much, Dr. Simi Malhotra, Professor Simi Malhotra, and all the distinguished colleagues who are participating in this program. It's a privilege to be here. Although before the program commenced and I could hear some of the participant colleagues, I'm not very sure that I'll have answer to all of those questions and the confusions that they have about the policy. I think we all have to together sort them out. But briefly, as you asked me, I would like to share my understanding of the policy with the colleagues here and the students who are participating. This policy is about many things, and there have been many documents, and quite often certain things are picked up from one document or another document, and that leads to all the more confusion. So we had this TSR Subramaniam committee reports, then we had Kasturi Rangan committee reports, then that was reduced to national education policy, and there were at least 4 or 5 versions of this national education policy. So I'm finally basing my discussions on this final 66-page English version of the document to avoid any confusion, which is uploaded on the Ministry of Education website. Policy has already been implemented at the national level. We have already celebrated the first year of the policy in July this year. And very soon, in another 3 months' time, we will be celebrating the second year of this policy. And one manifestation of the implementation of the policy is that the Ministry of Human Resource Development, its name is changed to Ministry of Education. So please allow me to share my screen with you. There are some bulleted points that would be the basis for sharing with you my understanding. How much time will I have, Dr. Malhotra?
Professor Kumar, it's really up to you. I mean, we are here, it's a Sunday, so as much time as you, and I think everybody is really looking forward to getting clarity. So I think it'll be really whatever time you want to take, Professor Kumar.
Okay, so given that kind of situation, so maybe anywhere anybody wants to stop me and provide more input or seek some clarification, you can do so if the time is not constrained. If time is a constraint, then I would like to take about 45 minutes to finish. And then there could be all the discussions that you want. I also do not have anything else to do today, so I am available for as long as you all want to. So let me share my screen. So is the screen visible? This is not a PPT, but a different method, but I'm sure that it must be visible to you all.
Yes, yes.
All right. So as I mentioned, that this policy was announced in 2020 and has already completed close to 2 years. Only 3 or 4 months remaining till we celebrate the second year. In order to minimize on time, I'm not going to share in detail with you the larger context of higher education, but very briefly, so I'm not going to share the remaining branches of this larger context, except to the fact that since independence, there have been 3 major concerns for higher education, and I'm particularly speaking about higher education. One was the concern that we are a very populous country and we need to create capacity to accommodate all those people who wish to pursue higher education. In absolute term, we have become the single largest system of higher education found anywhere in the world in terms of institutions. So no other country has 51,000 higher educational institutions as we have in our country. Not even the regional groupings have as many institutions. In terms of the enrollment, it was about 38.5 million about a year ago. That must have positively touched close to 40 million by now. So we are the second largest system of higher education in terms of enrollment. So capacity-wise, we have done a great deal. The second challenge has been that the capacity would not be utilized unless we make deliberate efforts to make our higher education system affordable, equitable, and inclusive. And some of the manifestations you are seeing presently, that like in engineering and management, we have created enough capacity that almost half of the seats remain untaken. In many cases, the number of students who apply to take admissions are less than the number of seats that are available in that particular states. On the other hand, there are also institutions where seat to application ratio could run into 1:100. Even within the university system, any university, be it our university or Delhi University, so within the university system, you will find that some departments, some programs have more applicants than they can accommodate, while there might be some departments, some programs where there are less. So that leads us to also say that making efforts to make higher education inclusive is important. Expanding capacity is important, but none of the objectives of higher education would be met unless we also ensure quality in higher education. Because people are looking for quality. How do we measure quality of higher education? That's a different ball games. So somebody would say that the quality of higher education in university system must essentially be measured by research, because research is the predominant domain of university system. Everything else, the skill, the employability, they are collateral to the main functions of the research. So best universities are known for their research. Although in India, we are presently in the phase where skilling and employability and what is the percentage of people who progress in their career, these are the important objectives. So to say it very briefly, expansion, equity, and excellence, these are the three that are important. And we have, since independence, made a remarkable progress on all of these three dimensions. First two positively, the second one could be some debate about it, depending on the measure that we take. So like if you recall that when we had become independent, at that time there were about only 1 lakh students in all higher educational institutions. There were only about 500 colleges. There were only about 20 or 21 universities in the country. Most of the students who were coming, they either came from the social elites or economic elites. Women were almost conspicuous by their absence. They didn't exist in the higher education system at all. That situation, in fact, had continued until 70s. And from 70s onwards, women started coming. Today, women are neck to neck, shoulder to shoulder with these students in terms of numbers. So the gender parity index has already become 1, which means the boys and the girls are equal. Of course, there are disciplinary variations. So in engineering, there are fewer women. In humanities, in education, there are far more women than men. Even in terms of excellence, girls are doing far better. You go to any convocation and you find that out of 10 medals given, 8 are won by girl students. And this is a global phenomenon, not only Indian phenomena. Recently, a book came that where are the missing boys, and they need to do something special about these male students in the campuses to ensure that their higher education does not suffer. Second point, very quickly, there are 2 targets that the National Education Policy sets for itself. One is to have an education system which will be second to none in the world. And the time frame is by 2040. Now, second to none by what parameters? So in terms of size, we are already second to none. In terms of enrollment, we are only second to China. But given the fact that China is now worried about its aging population and the population declining and adopting a policy to increase the number of people, we are soon likely to exceed China. So by 2040, I'm sure that these 2 targets would be met. In terms of quality, I mean, there is a big question mark. So you all recall all these statements that how come that none of our universities are amongst the top 100. That was the favorite pet sentence of former President Pranab Mukherjee ji. Every convocation, everywhere. And he also realized this. When he came to our convocation in Dharamshala, he said that I am almost repeating like a parrot. It was his words for the past 2 years as to how come that we are the largest number of institutions and none of our universities are. So in terms of excellence, we have to go a long way. And this policy, to some extent, tries to suggest ways and measures for excellence. And the second target that this policy is that this policy suggests that
तो खोला क्यों?
Professor Qasim, if you can just switch off your mic, please.
Okay. So our present gross enrollment ratio, meaning the number of students enrolled in higher education as a percentage to the population in the age group of 18 to 24, is presently about 27%. While the world average, if you go, it has to be a minimum of about 50%. There have been studies that once a nation achieves a gross enrollment ratio of 50%, then only it starts rising up the ladder in terms of the knowledge society, in terms of the knowledge economy, and in terms of the other outputs. So this policy talks about achieving 50% GER by 2035. I had done some rough calculation that tells me that in order to achieve this target, we need to grow our enrollment by about 5.5% annually, which in fact we are already doing. So by 2035, we will be able to meet this target, if not sooner than that. And particularly if all universities, the policy gives choice to universities that whether you follow 3 years of bachelor's program or 4 years of bachelor's program. But my feeling is that there are so much stake involved that most universities are likely to move towards 4-year program. And the moment you do 4 years undergraduate program, the number of people retaining or remaining in higher education would be for a longer period of time. And therefore, this will automatically add to about 7% to our GER. So this target is also to be achieved. The only thing is about excellence. Coming to, since you mentioned that, okay, this is being done by the institution's Innovation Council, although at that day I had said that I had not read the policy in terms of what are the provisions relating to creativity, critical thinking, lateral thinking, innovation. So I did some quick search, and you would be happy that this 66-page policy, the word innovation is mentioned on 16 pages, and as many times as 22 times. So let me quickly mention that what does it say, and that has relevance to the rest of the discussion that will follow. So generally speaking, this policy talks about that we need to ensure that our curricula, our syllabus, our pedagogy is such that it ensures creativity and the critical thinking. So this is a very progressive thought. In fact, teachers and educational institutions and the gurus and the masters always had this choice, or always had this dilemma, that whether to produce very obedient kind of students or very creative kind of students. So discipline versus creativity. So far, our system has been designed or had somehow accidentally developed in such a manner that our focus has been more on discipline, more on obedience, rather than allowing people to think. So we trained our right from schools until higher education people that whatever is written in the textbook or whatever the teacher is teaching is correct, and you can't challenge and you can't question this. Globally, the world had moved starting from 50s and right from the history of education, that the paradigm shift in the society, in science, in technology, in anything, came only when somebody challenged the existing belief and knowledge. Of course, some people had to sacrifice their lives for saying so. So this policy says that, okay, the focus should be on ensuring creativity and the critical thinking. And in the definition of the critical thinking, they are also including innovation. Generally speaking, this policy says that education must centrally involve, that is a kind of elaboration of the first sentence, but then that is mentioned, found at a page, that must centrally involve critical thinking, discussion, debate, research, and innovation. So the focus is on that. So written policy states this. In practice, what is happening, I need not specify, maybe that is not an occasion. Presently, my purpose is to provide information sharing, so I'm not presenting a critique of the policy. In fact, one of the colleagues has on WhatsApp mentioned that will it be to support NEP or will it be to oppose NEP? I remain silent. So my purpose is to inform. The third point that it mentions about, in general, for school and college higher education all put together, that this policy conceptualizes a National Education Technology Forum. And this National Education Technology Forum appears to be, although the details are not given, but appears to be a kind of platform, technology-based platform, where all stakeholders in higher education, students and teachers and administration, all included, for the exchange of ideas, for the articulation of the new ideas, and for articulation of the ideas for research and innovation. So it means the policy, to this extent, believes that what you get out of the collective consultation is far better than what is imposed by individuals. So now coming to school education, because schools are integral to higher education, there is a backward and forward linkage. We can't separate school from higher education, and we can't separate higher education from school education. School education feeds into higher education, and it is the higher education that produces teachers for schools. So it is a backward and forward linkage, and therefore we cannot escape a little discussion on schools. And in the context of the school education, this policy says that the regulation of school education, be it the managing committee or be it the panchayat level committee or the state and the district level committees, they must be such that they should not prevent innovation. So again, they are talking about creativity. Second thing that they mention is that these school management committees, they must improve their governance, monitoring, oversights. All should be aimed at innovation. So they are taking that innovation ought to be integral to the whole education system right from the school level. And they are also saying that since in school education, the training has been an important part, not only pre-service training, but also in-service training, which they are calling or referring to as the continuous professional development. So they are saying that innovation should be an integral component of the continuous professional developments, based on the assumptions that knowledge is fast becoming redundant, and there are redundancies. So what we know today may not remain relevant tomorrow. In fact, that is a huge challenge itself, that the way the technology and the real life situations are changing, that we don't know as a teacher that what syllabus do we prescribe. You develop a syllabus, and by the fourth year, when the students graduate, chances are that quite a lot of that would become useless. Given the fact that they are saying that many things could be done by machines, or even the decisions could be taken by artificial intelligence, would not require any human interface, or the machine would learn to do things, so machine learning. So they are saying that I think we should be preparing our students and our teachers to continuously innovate and upgrade their knowledge and the scheme of the things. So it has to be a part of the continuous professional development. Let us now come as to what it has to say about higher education in terms of innovation. And I think all of these are focused to your IIC. Good that we now have an IIC in our campus. So they are saying that higher education essentially is about knowledge and innovation. So the point that I first mentioned, that this policy also assumes that higher education is not as much about dissemination of knowledge or communication of knowledge, or of course the policy also talks about skilling, etc. But somebody jokingly said that when Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister, some 30 years ago, she converted 100 polytechnics into universities. And we in India somehow are bent upon converting many universities into polytechnics. So with the focus on, but then the universities are essentially meant for knowledge creation, innovation. And it is only then they make change in the society, in the economy, the way things are done, then the businesses become dependent. In one of my blog, I had written that when universities are engaged in research, then the whole world listens to universities. But if that is not, then the universities are forced to listen to everybody else. And presently in India, we are in a situation that nobody is listening to universities. Everybody else wants universities to listen to them. So be it industry, be it politicians, be it, and everybody speaks out of his own experience. So if you have not yourself been a good teacher or a good student, you will always assume that everybody is not a good teacher and a good student. So that is the kind of feeling that you will have. But the policy says that focus on higher education, in higher education on knowledge creation and innovation. They also say that we should link our programs, whatever are the programs, in terms of creativity, development of critical thinking, innovation, and higher order capacities and skills. So going beyond the textbook. So it is not like that unless you have reproduced what the CBSE curricula or what your textbook or what your teachers gave, you don't get marks presently. But that has to change. Allow students to apply their minds and be innovative in answering the questions. They are also mentioning in terms of innovation that higher education institution must develop a specific mechanism and a kind of competition. Some educationists may not agree with the word competition. They say that higher education should be free of competition. It should be a world of cooperation. But here they are mentioning mechanism and competition for promoting innovation. So they are talking about having an ecosystem where the institutions are able to innovate in terms of their own content, but also in terms of the way their societies are being run and managed and changed. These institutions are also required to promote this innovation not only in the technology, because quite often the innovation or invention is linked to only science, discovery, innovation, invention, linked to only science, but they are saying that no, there is a scope for innovation across all disciplines. So humanities, liberal arts, social sciences, and sciences. So the policy emphasizes this. And it concludes that research and innovation is critical. And they are also suggesting a methodology, because university is here to all others, that, okay, you drive innovation by being in touch with the industry. So be connected, develop the industry linkages. I think this idea has been discussed, deliberated several times. The industry's requirement is that they use for their business a particular technology that they have access to. And they want students to be ready to use those technology and start helping them doing their businesses. Conventionally and globally, this task was assigned to polytechnics and ITIs. That, okay, given the level of technology for as a mechanic for the car or as a floor shop manager to assemble the car, you are taught that technology. And then you become immediately useful without any further training by the employer. But the role of the university was seen that they should be at the forefront of developing new technologies, so that industry is compelled to take technology from you and start doing their business on the basis of those technologies. So this policy talks about that, okay, we should do industry linkage, but I will say that industry linkage in the sense that how can universities produce new technologies, new discoveries to help universities do this? Because so long as industry is dependent on imported technology, so they are then not dependent on their own higher educational institutions or academia. They only need people to be trained to use this technology, which may not be good. And then the policy laments that we in India, and this is not my criticism, this is the policy that mentions, we in India are spending 0.69% of the GDP on research and innovation. And how does it compare? United States spent 2.8% of its GDP, but the GDP of United States is, huge, the largest economy, several times over. We may be presently fifth in dollar terms or third in purchasing power term, but if you compare the absolute value, and then America has only 17 million population, 170 million populations, so they spend 2.8% of their GDP. Israel spent about 4.3% of its GDP. And South Korea, a small nation, spends about 4.2% of its GDP. And GDP in absolute number of Korea is higher than the GDP in absolute numbers of India. So the policy, therefore, indirectly hints that we have to increase investments in research and innovation. And of course, you are all familiar that they have conceptualized the National Research Foundation. And this National Research Foundation's job is to finance and fund research on competitive basis. Initially, the Kasturi Rangan Committee report has said that this NRF shall have its own corpus to finance, and this will not impinge and impact the existing funding that is available to scientists, social scientists, and humanities. So DST, DBT, CSIR, ICSSR, UGC, they will continue to finance research the way they have been doing. On top of it, there would be competitive research. But the way it has been implemented is, I think all others have stopped funding, and those resources have been pooled to NRF, and NRF is giving research. And a somewhat dangerous trend is that they are also defining a kind of preference areas of research or priorities areas of research, the researchers that are needed in the national interest, etc. So globally, the academia has resisted this temptation. They say that you cannot immediately link research to your national interest or to your immediate industry needs. Because many times you engage in research whose value you realize maybe after 50 years, after 20 years. All the work which people in the Department of Physics had done long time ago, those were the things which became foundation for all IT and computer science and other things. At that time, if you had asked those people that what is the relevant, perhaps people may not have been able to explain. But then they are saying that, okay, NIRF would not only fund research, but would also finance innovation. And then accordingly, even before the policy came, you saw that NITI Aayog had Atal Tinkering Lab that has now become Atal Innovation Labs. Then there have been funding for incubation centers, funding for research park, technology park. One best model was presented by IIT Madras, where they had a huge research and technology park. The best model that you can see is in Cambridge and Oxford, where there are industries operating on their campuses and their own students. And then there is a knowledge creation and other things. And the policy says that India has been Vishwaguru, and therefore India must now still lead the research and innovation agenda for the world. But then that is a big challenge for the country as a whole. In terms of the regulatory framework, in terms of innovation, the policy says that regulation must encourage an environment for research and innovation. So the whole regulatory framework should be such. Regulation, it laments that regulation has neither checked a malpractices in higher education so far, nor has it promoted quality. And at the same time, the regulation so far has not been able to curb excellence and innovation in India. These are the language of the National Education Policy. In one of the papers and a lecture and a popular article that I had published, going into the data since independence or pre-independence period, starting from 1858 or so, and all data indicated that quality of higher education in India has been inversely proportional to the intensity of regulation. So the more intensive you try to regulate higher education, the more you are likely to damage quality. So I'm happy that the policy also said this. And maybe based on that, now you have the graded autonomy idea, you gave autonomy to IIMs. But I think this mindset of controlling is very difficult to disappear immediately. So Air India may have been privatized, given to Tatas, but then still you have a concern that the CEO that they have appointed is not suitable to India. So that kind of mindset prevails not only in higher education, but also others. And it may take some time to disappear and some time to go. Internal governance of the universities, they are saying that the governance should ideally be thinking out of the box ideas. Since you have said that there is no time limit, let me share. What happens is that with every reforms, things change. And that also makes many things redundant. But what happens is that we do not give up those things which have become redundant. So we keep on having the bullock carts and the Mercedes all simultaneously together. So there was in a monastery a Zen master who was very fond of his cat. And he was so fond of his cat that could not spend even an hour without his cat. So he started bringing the cat with him while he was meditating. So in reference to this Zen master, other monks also started bringing in a cat along with them. When this cat died, they brought in another cat. Some people in the universities also did research to prove that presence of an animal by your side improves the quality of concentration. And 300 years passed and it became a practice to keep a cat, a feline, by your side while you are meditating. And then came a Zen master who was allergic to cat, wanted to get rid of it, wanted to find a basis, and he found no basis in the text. But then there was a revolt in all the monastery systems in Japan that how can you do meditation, concentration without a cat? Now in our higher education system, what has happened is that every new thing has been added or has become another layer of so many other litters that already exist. So that is why many things fail. So semester system is not only conducting 2 examinations in a year, but semester system has a belief, has a philosophy that, okay, you trust your teacher. It is the teacher who design the curricula individually and collectively. It is the teacher who evaluate their students, who set their students, so there is no internal and external kind of a thing. But in India, we are still continuing. And the result is that the last time we implemented semester system in 73, by 76 to 77, that semester system had become impossible to implement. Even when we had semester system in India, already at least 10 states have decided to give up semester system because examination results have been delayed. Because the whole logistics that they earlier used to have only once in a year, they are now required to do. So this policy says that, okay, think out of box, think differently as to how efficiently you can perform the task that you are supposed to do. Then the leadership of the institution should be such that it should create a culture of excellence and innovations. So no bound template. Higher educational institutions are said to be made independent so that they could experiment, because innovation does not come without experimentation. And whenever you do experimentation, there are chances of failures. So if you are so fearful of the failures that there are fines, etc., then you would not be able to experiment. So we need to create conditions that people could experiment with new ideas, with new thinking, with new methods. So the policy says so. And they want the leadership at all levels in the institutions to be outstanding and enthusiastic so as to cultivate this kind of innovation. And I think this idea is very much, I appreciate this idea provided it's implemented, that all the Nobel Prize winners, I'm not including the Peace Prize, all other Nobel Prize winners from India, there is only one who studied in India up to the highest level and worked in India, and he got Nobel Prize, and that was C.V. Raman. All others obtained their first degree or second degree even. They had to leave India in search of an ecosystem where they could perform better, and they won Nobel Prize by being abroad, by working abroad in other educational institutions. That's the question of the ecosystem, and we need to change this. Having one of the criteria of the Academic University of World Ranking, the Shanghai-based ranking, is that how many Nobel laureates are there in your university as a faculty, in your alumni. But keeping a Nobel laureate on your campus is a great, huge challenge for the leadership, because they have their own whims and fancies, they have their own requirements, they have their own things. So you need to create an environment. In fact, in India, for a long time, we had this kind of culture on the Indian campuses. I think there are people from Hindi department and Urdu department, you will remember, Faraq Gorakhpuri in his lifetime had every such thing in his personality that any university would have suspended him today or terminated his services today. But somehow, the University, Allahabad University, Gorakhpur, they all tolerated him because of his excellence and because of his eminence. So having said all of these things, these are introduction, the policy believes that higher education need to change structurally. They are not using this word, structural reforms, but I'm saying that they are talking about structural reforms in the area of regulation, institutions, and programs. So let me share this, and I think this is with which we are presently struggling in all our universities. And the problem is some of the best institutions are finding many things difficult to implement, while some of the worst institutions have already said that they have implemented. that is a challenge. So this policy talks about that we need to change the program structure. Program is what we normally refer to as courses, but let us stick to the global terminology. So they want these silos between the discipline to break up. That the doctor should not only know medicines, but should also know some psychology, some sociology, some humanities. Engineers should not only know their mathematics and engineering and designing and architecture, but they should also be good human beings, should also be familiar with so many other challenges, because of the simple reasons that no problem in the world can be solved by the knowledge of a single discipline. You need to make use of many disciplines to be able to address and approach any challenge that we are presently facing. Do you think that the problem of peace can be solved only by armaments, technology, or military science technology? Certainly no. You need politics, you need sociology, you need economics, you need commerce, all of those kinds of things. So they want all programs to be multidisciplinary. Many of you have exposure and experience of other countries. So like in the US particularly, they have adopted that in their undergraduate bachelor's program, 2 years is meant for a student to swim across the campus. That is the term that they use, swim across the campus. Move from department to department, discipline to discipline, wherever you want to. And you have a taste of many subjects during those 2 years. After this 2 years, once you have swam across the campus, having seen many disciplines, then the next year you devote to diving deep into that chosen discipline that you choose. So any curricular reforms as per this policy would require us to create a framework whereby students could choose whatever they want to study. Now this is needed. This is a global best practice, but it also has many challenges. Because these choices or giving these choices to students would be seriously constrained by the availability of teacher, by the adequacy of the classrooms, because the limited they are, the lesser choice you would be able to do, because then people would not be able to. So like when the choice-based credit system was implemented, its idea was that, okay, give people choice that, okay, up to 20% of the programs they could take from anywhere in the universities. But then what universities did, they designed special programs for those people from other disciplines to come to their department and study them. That defeated the whole idea and the whole purpose, because the whole idea was that if bioscience people who are doing major, along with them, somebody from computer science, somebody from humanities, somebody from other disciplines, they sit together, they make friends, only then their horizon would be widened. So this multidisciplinarity argument is this, that let all students be multidisciplinary. But that requires huge infrastructural enhancement. Otherwise, it will be very limited in scope. Second thing is that in most countries where this policy of multidisciplinarity is there, this decision or this choice is given to students. So there is no imposition either from the government side or the regulator side or the university side that these are the core that you have to study. These are the compulsories that you have to study. I mean, the idea was to get out of that. And the essential argument was that by the time students come to our campuses, they are already 18 plus. At that time, they have got the voting rights. If you can rely on them, if you can depend on them to choose their leaders, to choose their prime minister, to choose who the president of the country would be, then at least allow them to choose what they want to study. Not only that, somehow the way the information communication technology is developing, teachers are less tech savvy than the students. You must have come across that when a grandfather is presented with a smartphone, he asks the granddaughter to tell him that how to go about. And the granddaughter can explain better than the daughter himself. Third thing is that the teachers have got a vested interest in perpetuating their own specialization because they don't want to become redundant and they don't want to upgrade themselves. So they therefore force that their courses should be taught so that they remain relevant. On the other hand, things are changing. So give students these choices. But if you do not do this, if only people with gray hairs and no hairs sit on these decisions as to what should be the core, what should be the compulsory, what should be the optional, then the purpose would not be served. Second suggestion that this policy has that they make the program modular. In fact, when the policy was working, this Kasturi Kandan report, I had given a detailed explanation on this modularity. Presently, a student is admitted to a program of study. That program has a minimum duration specified. And then there is also a maximum duration. In that minimum and maximum duration, the student has to complete all the course requirement that is prescribed by seniors, teachers. Maybe 100 years ago, that was good because the teachers had more knowledge, more experience than the students. Access to knowledge was not there to this extent as students have now. And if the students somehow could not meet those requirements, then the student would be labeled as a dropout, as a failure. Leave the university after spending some 2-3 years with nothing. The modularity is a dimension which enables that, okay, if you have taken admission, say, in a 2 years master's program, we implemented this in the Central University of Himachal, so let me share that experience. And we said that if somebody completes 2 semesters, then if this person is unable to continue further, for any reason, then this person would leave if he has successfully completed. If he has successfully completed the 2 semesters, has met all the requirements, then this person would leave with an advanced diploma. And then there would be a time frame given, and this time frame would be linked that how frequently do you overhaul your syllabus. So supposing, I'm not talking about minor changes, I'm talking about complete overhaul of your pedagogy and the courses. So supposing you do that every 5th year, so you allow these students that within 5 years, if he wants to come or if she wants to come, she could join from the 3rd semester onward and then complete the remaining 2 semesters and get his master's degree. When we started this in the Central University of Himachal Pradesh, for the first 2 years, like when we had our first convocation, no students availed this. They all wanted to complete. By the time we had our second convocation, meaning the 3rd year of the university, some 20 students availed this option of leaving campus with an advanced diploma. So we were curious, so we had a meeting with these students that why don't you continue? And then we found that most of these students, after their bachelor's, they were also appearing for various competitive examinations for jobs. Some for UPSC, some for insurance, some for banks, some for ECGC. And these 20 students had got a job. They had successfully completed their competitive test requirements. And for them, continuing with education was not a good idea because they were not certain that after 1 year again they would be able to qualify. So they wanted to take up their jobs. Now, had there not been an option, these people would have left the university as a dropout or as a failure of the Central University of Himachal Pradesh. But with this option available, these students graduated with an advanced diploma and they got their degrees in the convocation itself. So that is the idea of the multiple entry and multiple exit. Gone are the days, I think we are all very senior colleagues in the campus, so gone are the days when there was one life, one wife, one job, one salary. Now things have all changed. You do many jobs. The jobs are not permanent. Neither the employees are loyal to their organizations, nor organizations are faithful to their employees. So people keep on changing. And then we saw that during this pandemic, when people migrated, so it is not only that the adults migrated, the children also migrated with them. So those who were living then in Mumbai and had to migrate to a village in, say, Muzaffarnagar or Muzaffarpur, I mean, all of their education got disturbed. Now we are seeing that this wars and crisis, so we saw that the refugees, be it the Iraq one or the Libya ones or the Syria ones or the Yemen ones, people are somehow compelled by the circumstances beyond their control and they are leaving. Sometimes they do so also because they want to build a career and the career building requires them to change. So if people are leaving in between, let them leave with grace, let them leave with dignity, let them get a certificate, maybe with some certificates, so you could split it in two. So they are doing this modularity. And then another thing that they are saying is that give or design your program with a flexibility. And the flexibility is that make your content holistic. So don't, as I mentioned before, with regard to multidisciplinarity, give opportunity to all people, all graduates to know something a little bit about other disciplines. So that broadens their horizon, thinking, mindset. Introduce the idea of the liberal arts. So don't say that people who do English need not know any mathematics, or people who are doing physics need not know any psychology. Get away of this notion. So bring in a holistic approach. So say, for example, let everybody at the school level and the college level, the STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, management kind of programs, or mathematics kind of program, they should all do a little bit. Because later on in your career, you need all of those disciplines. Now, again, it all depends on the availability of the teachers. So if you have a single teacher college, it will not be possible. If you have only a teacher college, it will not be possible where there are only few teachers. If it's only a medical university or an engineering student, so they're talking about that, make it all holistic. So no single discipline institution would exist. All would be multidisciplinary. An idea which institutions like ours, Jamia, had since 1920, since the last century, have been propagating. All the universities that were designed anywhere in the world, UK, Europe, anywhere, they were following this practice. In India also, we had this practice. So like medical, engineering, management, they always used to be part of the mainstream university. But later on, because of something, the medical got separated. So like I studied at Lucknow University earlier, the medical college was part of the Lucknow University. Architecture was part of the university. And in fact, many teachers of the medical college were doing such a good research with the help of the Birbal Sahni Institute of Paleobotany or various other CSIR institutions, labs, that the university was getting a name and the college, of course, but then the medical university, it became a separate medical university. Architecture became a separate one. The music, like Bhatkhande used to be a college of the university, that became a separate deemed university. So we over a time did this. And for an academic discussion, the Yashpal committee reports enlighten us that what has been the harm of that. One of the harm that Yashpal committee said that so long as people worked in silos, they didn't know how their inventions are useful or how can they approach differently. So maybe people in the Department of Physics invented ultrasounds, but they didn't know what to do about it unless he met another friend in a canteen who was doing a medical education and who said, "Hey, this is a wonderful invention. We can do a lot more without cutting open the body, and we can know and we can prescribe." Then they have given flexibility in terms of time. So they say that, okay, you can have either a 3 years of bachelor's program or you can have a 4 years of bachelor's program. So the choice is that of the institutions. But then if you have both 3 and 4 years program, then you shall have to distinguish these two programs in some terms. So recall a long time ago, even before we were in the university, people of my age, so the bachelor's degree used to be of 2 years. And if you did 1 more years, then you used to get BA honors. Later on, we said that, okay, BA would be of 3 years. And then like in Jamia, everybody gets BA honors. In Delhi University, they designed a special program of BA pass, kind of a thing. So the same idea is being repeated. So we had a good idea earlier in the past, although policy denies this. The policy says that nothing happened after ancient India. But then we had these policies. So they say that, okay, you have a 3-year program or a 4-year program. 3 years would be a simple bachelor, 4 years would be the bachelor with research. Then they are similarly also giving that your master's degree program could be of 1 year or 2 years, but then there is only one problematic thing that you may have to face. They are saying that if somebody has done a 3 years bachelor, then he will have to do 2 years master. And somebody who has done 4 years bachelor's, for that he will have to do 1 year master's. Now, problem would be faced by disciplines like, say, management. Management admits students from engineering, from technology, from medicine. So some comes with 3 years bachelor's, some comes with 4 years bachelor's. So the challenge would be that can we give a 1 year MBA degree to engineers and 2 years degree to an economist? So these are the challenges on which we need to apply our mind. If we do not apply our mind, then perhaps somebody in the UGC or in the MHRD would put together some people who think that they are experienced, would prescribe for us, and then we would be at receiving end. So it is better that we apply our mind. Mind you that what teachers do, seniors do, is necessarily good, is not at all true. I tell you my experience of this MBA program in Jamia. When we launched, we adopted UGC and AICTE curricula. That UGC and AICTE curricula provided that every MBA students must learn something about computer applications. So they had prescribed a course, computer application in business, so we adopted. None of the students wanted to study this course, this paper. And we didn't know that what is the purpose. I mean, they would want to just sit under a tree, loiter around, but would not come to those classes. We thought that it's a teacher problem. But then we also changed the teacher because the teacher was a guest faculty. But then this problem was not solved. And the student always, but never came up to tell that what is an issue. It was later when my daughter reached to the 6th standards, then I found that what she is learning in the 6th standard was being taught to MBA people at that time. So certainly they had, and then I did a survey of my own students and found 92% were the CBSE graduates, and they were coming from private schools. So they already had gone through the CPU and the floppy disk and the hard drive and the PowerPoint and the words. Now, this is expected. I am old person, very experienced person, very senior professors, had no exposure of computers, but think that it's important. So the syllabus that I designed would be of that kind. So they're talking about flexibility in the syllabus, flexibility in the duration. And then there is one thing that they are saying, that seamless mobility. Of course, I may have some serious reservation. This seamless mobility idea is that why you bind students to a university. Allow these students to keep on learning from anywhere. So you learn from Open Michigan, you learn from MOOCs, you learn from Udacity, you learn from Coursera, you learn from edX, you learn from anywhere. And what you learned and those certificates that you got should be acceptable and transferable. So it's talking about the credit transferability. Of course, the credit transfer possibility has always been there. Every university was free to decide that which credit to accept, though none of the universities were doing it, for the reason that different institutions are of different standards in our country. So IITs would never agree to the idea that, okay, somebody who did his first 2 semesters of engineering, say, in any private college, IICT approved, where there were no selectivity, everybody who applied got the admission. So IIT would never accept any credit from there. So institution had their own quality control mechanism. But now this policy says that, okay, permit this credit transfer. And when you have this credit transfer, this modularity and multiple exit and multiple entry would also come into picture, would be a facilitator. And to facilitate this process and to take care of the variations in the institutions, they have come up with a very fantastic, unique idea, which no other country has so far. That is, you develop an academic bank of credit. So this is like a demat account for those who are familiar with the trading in the share market. So it's a demat account that you open, and whatever credit you accumulate from wherever, you go on depositing in this academic bank of credit. And once you think that you have accumulated enough credit to get a degree, you can approach a university that, okay, here are my qualifications that I have accumulated. This might also include the prior learning. So say, for example, a son in whose family there is a business of sweet making, has a prior knowledge how to make laddus and jalebis, can also say that I have knowledge, I have this skill, so recognize them. And then this university would evaluate whatever are the courses of his credit, and according to its standard, it would decide that which courses it can accept, which courses it cannot accept. And while this is being developed, already government said that, okay, they said that, okay, you may choose some courses from MOOCs. So earlier they said that, okay, up to 20% of the credits you can accumulate through MOOCs. And the MOOCs, they meant by SWAM. SWAM is the Indian version of the MOOCs launched by people. And then they also said that, okay, NPTEL, etc., they are all on MOOCs. So you take from the SWAM up to 20%. Now that has been increased to 40%. So what they are doing, I said that to implement multidisciplinarity and modularity and flexibility, you had a constraints of time, you had a constraints of classrooms, and you had a constraint of teachers. So by permitting students, or rather encouraging or compelling students to take these many courses online, they are reducing those constraints to that limit. will it be good? Already there are views that, okay, how can it be implemented? And there are also an inherent danger in one of the satirical piece I had written for a publication that came from Mexico, that, okay, if you have this kind of a policy of credit transfers and seamless mobility, so where is the need of a university? You develop a higher education qualification authority. This higher education qualification authority would evaluate these qualifications. So let every nation have one. So you don't need all the universities. And maybe after some time, the oligarchs of the world politics would say that why do you need so many, one in every country? Why not let that be located at the United Nations or in United States, a universal or international or global qualification recognition authority? I think these are the challenges. And a major philosophical question is that whether we want India to be producer of knowledge or we want India to be only a consumer of knowledge. If India remains a consumer of knowledge, that suits to a large number of people, because as a consumer of knowledge, now you are in a better position to demand various products and services. And then you don't pose any competition or any challenge to any power. But then India, with its might, and so far our policy has been that we should be the producer of knowledge. So this was all about structural reforms in the domain of programs. Then they say that this program domain, I think in Jamia we are more concerned about this program restructuring. And I think it requires huge debates. Nobody has any answer or any solution. It would be easier to say that, okay, we have adopted the UGC things, but it will be extremely difficult. But then there are other institutions which have an additional challenges. So, and they are saying that this program reforms would not be possible unless you also have institutional reforms. And in the institutional reforms at the top comes that abolish the affiliation systems. So right from 19th century, various commissions have been saying that affiliation system is not a good system. But then every commission also said, but then we do not have an alternative to provide education and to have as many universities. So the approach so far has been that, okay, gradually phase out. So like last time in the 11th plan, we said that, okay, limit the number of colleges to a university. So like when I was in Rajasthan as Vice Chancellor, there were about close to 1,000 colleges affiliated to it. So in a 3-year tenure, if I wanted to visit a college once, that was an impossibility, given the area and the size and the distance. So at that time, the limit that was imposed was that, okay, limit it to 200, and then later on limit it to 100 colleges. So you saw many universities bifurcating, trifurcating, or split into 4 or 5 independent universities, like Bangalore University got split into 4, and different colleges were affiliated to them. But this policy says that do away with affiliation at all. Affiliation indeed is a troublesome thing. On the one hand, the universities to which these colleges are affiliated, they are burdened with the examination and other kinds of things, so much that they are not able to focus on research. So that way Jamia has been lucky. Jamia has an advantage that we didn't have an affiliation system or even associated colleges. On the other hand, best colleges affiliated to a university will feel suffocated because the university would not allow them to do innovation, to introduce new programs, to introduce or try a new methodology. So they will feel suffocated. So abolishing affiliation system and allowing every institutions to award degree in its own name appears to be a good idea. Even otherwise, when you are sitting in the interviews for candidates, so somebody who has done, say, his graduation from St. Stephen's or from Miranda or from Sri Ram College, and you ask him that where did you do your graduation from? He will name the college. She will name the college. If he has done from a college which is not considered to be as reputable, then he will name Delhi University. And mere reply would tell you that from where he is coming. So some colleges have a huge reputation. Some colleges are known for their quality, while most are not. And therefore, in fact, by one analysis that I had done, out of about 51,000 colleges, there are a maximum of 3,000 colleges which have reputation of their own, and their degrees would have some value. The rest, they survive on this umbilical relationship with the universities. But the policy wants that they need to be done away with, and therefore a consolidation would take place. They are saying that this way we will be able to reclassify higher educational institutions into research universities, the universities which are large sized, where the primary focus is on research and innovation, but they will also engage in teaching. So the idea is that maybe they will have only PG program and the PhD program, or sometime also limited number of UG program. So keep the JNU or Hyderabad in mind. The rest of the universities, they are saying that could be a teaching university where their primary focus is to prepare a student for job, to prepare a student for further career progression, but they will also be engaged into some research. And their idea of classifying this or this categorization is that the evaluation criteria would be different. For a research university, they would be measured in terms of their citation and their publications. A teaching university would be measured perhaps in terms of the graduate employability and the other things. But the problem is that if you take away research from universities, then there is hardly any difference between university and school. In school teaching, since it is to develop some kind of cognitive abilities in the students, so there is a given content, and that given content teachers try to communicate to the student in an effective manner so that that knowledge gets imprinted into the students. In university system, the expectation is that the research should inform teaching, and teaching should help them do better research. I mean, it is proven that if you work in a research lab only with no teaching requirement, the ideas do not come. When you are teaching in the classroom and you encourage students to ask questions, many new ideas come, and then you do research. So separating research and teaching may not be a good idea. Again, and then they are saying that the rest of the institution would become higher educational autonomous institutions. So they will award their degrees in their own names. And in order to be able to do that, they will have to upscale themselves by becoming multidisciplinary. So these 10,000 teachers training institutes will have to be upgraded into multidisciplinary institutions. These PGDBM institutes or a management institute affiliated to university which has a single discipline with a maximum of 8 teachers or 15 teachers, they will have to become multidisciplinary. So these are the kind of institutional restructuring in terms of size and in terms of adding more disciplines, adding more courses is the idea. And in the process, those who are not able to resize or upsize, they will face closure. Or they have the option of forming a cluster and various institutions become part of this cluster. Now, if these clusters are located in a geographic concentration, it's possible. So like if you take up the Greater Noida Knowledge City, and if you put all these institutions into a cluster and a new university, Knowledge University, say for example, then it is possible. But say if you take a state like Bihar and you form clusters, some located in Gaya, some located in Patna, some located in Muzaffarpur, it's likely to affect. So there are some people who are worried about that if the closure takes place, so the availability of the higher educational institution in the immediate close neighborhood of people may not be there. So they will have to travel. We also know that education closer to home is cheaper than education farther away from home, even if the fees is low. So like in Delhi University, the annual fees may be 600 rupees, but then you have to pay about 15,000 rupees for living as a paying guest accommodation a month. So that adds to the cost. Then there are issues with regard to women education, that how would it play out as far as the girls. Now people have started opening up. The resistance is gone. Now no parent resists that their girl child must not go to college. They all want, but they want them to go closer to the home or to the cities where some relatives, etc. are there. So there is a challenge of the size restructuring and multiple restructuring. Lastly, let me come to some of the regulatory reforms. Everybody since National Knowledge Commission have been saying that multiplicity of the regulators is acting as a barrier. So like Jamia has law, Jamia has dental, Jamia has so many other departments, and there are separate regulators for all of them. So all the time Jamia is experiencing one visit or the other from one regulator or the other. Jamia still is that way, not that large. But many other institutions have this problem. And most importantly, many times, many different regulators provide different benchmarks and different standards. So MCI requires your teachers to be made professors more rapidly, but then the professor's pay scale is lower. UGC says that you need to spend 17 years to become promoted to professors, but then the salary scales of the professors are higher. Now they're trying to find out some way out that, okay, special regulatory bodies would prevail over the general regulatory body. But then the multiplicity has been a challenge. So they said that, okay, there would be one single Higher Education Commission of India, HESI. In fact, since National Knowledge Commission, various commissions and committees, so say for example, National Knowledge Commission has set up IRAHE, Independent Regulatory Authority in Higher Education. Jashpal Committee suggested that National Commission for Higher Education and Research. At one time, Niti Aayog and PMO had suggested another name. So 5-6 names, and the joke at that time used to be that you put any 4-5 alphabets together, it will become an abbreviation for a new regulatory body. But now finally it is settled that it is HESI. And this HESI would have 4 verticals. One, National Higher Education Regulatory Commission, which will regulate higher education. Then there would be a body for accreditation, but don't confuse it with the NAC or NBA. This body's purpose would be to provide license to other agencies to get powers to accredit institutions. So international players, national players, private players might come, provided they are granted permissions and license by the NAC. Then they say that there would be a standard setting body of higher education. And they are saying that existing professional and regulatory bodies like AICTE and Council of Architecture and the Nursing Council and the Rehabilitation Council, they will all become standard setting bodies. And they will be member of the General Education Council. And the purpose of the General Education Council would be to set the standards of each discipline. So maybe a council for economics to set up a standard for economics and so on and so forth. And another body, Higher Education Grants Council. So maybe the University Grants Commission may be deprived of the other power that it had and would be allowed to focus on only grant giving functions. But then already Higher Education Grants Council or the University Grants Commission, they are now gotten rid of as far as the development fundings are concerned. So universities now are not getting developmental funding. Either they are getting funding under RUSA, or for development purposes, you are getting loan under the Higher Education Funding Council, which is a collaborative joint venture between the Canara Bank and the Ministry of Human Resource Development. This was an idea which people thought would be easier to implement. And I have been writing in various popular articles that any institution fail not only because of the design defect. You are all assuming that there is a design defect in these regulatory bodies, and therefore you need to replace them with the new design institutions. But institutions also fail because of the people who are part of those institutions, either at a leadership position or as a managerial position or as an employee. Organization also fails because of the context in which they exist and operate. So the context of the US is not exactly similar to the context of India. Those are individualistic societies. Everybody is independent. So if you are chairman of a body in United States, you would not listen even to your father or to your mother. These are the two separate domains. Your relation with your family is one thing, but India is a familial society. Here you are influenced by a number of factors. Maybe you may say no to your father, but it will become extremely difficult to say no to your Tauji because he will take offense. Also, in our growth process, most of the people who are in our age, we never got anything in our life by way of right. So for everything, you needed somebody's favor. So you wanted a telephone, so you needed somebody to give you a favor. You needed a Bajaj Chetak scooter at that time, you needed somebody's favor. So when you grow up in that kind of society, you have your own challenges. And then finally, the process that these institutions follow. Now, these context and the people, they cannot be changed immediately. For example, India cannot be made into United States of America, though maybe it will happen after 50 years. But people here are related. There are still, if not actually joint families, extended families, but still the relationships and so on and so forth. So Sifarish Vasta phenomena still exist. Corruption is a factor. So it's very difficult to change immediately. What they can change is the process that they follow. To follow a transparent mechanism, an objective mechanism for decision making, then things would improve. And that you can do even in the existing institution. But unfortunately, nobody has been able to find out that what is wrong with UGC or IIC-CIE. And if they have become corrupt, what is the guarantee that the others would not become corrupt? So these are the challenges. And finally, a few points. Ultimately, everything hinges on the funds, money. So good thing is that this committee or this policy says that the government should be committed to invest at least 6% of the GDP. Presently, we are spending about 2.8% of the GDP. So that means doubling it more. But the policy does not talk about in what time frame, in how many years, like GER, etc. So we are not very hopeful that very soon we shall see substantive, massive increase. In fact, if you have read the General Financial Rules of 2016, it says that all institutions shall mobilize money by charging user charges, etc., so that in due course of time they become self-dependent. So the tendencies of privatizations are fast finding inroads into public higher educational institutions. So presently we do not have, and particularly because of the pandemics and some of the policies, the kind of economic hit that we had, perhaps the resources would not be available. The second thing this policy says that presently there is a kind of bias between the public and the private institutions. So public institutions get favor, considered better. They are saying that no, public and private would be treated at par, no discrimination. The only condition that they are imposing is that all private institutions should be philanthropic in nature, meaning they will not make profit, and they should be public spirited. So I don't understand the meaning of the public spirited. Many people find it difficult to explain. So maybe their idea is that, okay, if they are all like IIC or IISc Bangalore kind of institutions, that though it was established by Tatas, but then it became public institutions. They are saying that all institutions would offer liberal scholarships to make it equitable. So assumption is that the fees would go higher, resources would be raised, but then in order to make it affordable for the weaker section of the society, you will provide a scholarship. There is no mention that whether the money would come from the government for these scholarships. And if IITs are examples, when the fees were raised to 2 lakh rupees a year, 2 lakh rupees a semester, then it was said that, okay, SC, ST and OBC would not be required to pay fees. So the IITs had to bear this expense out of the fees that they collect from the remaining students. So it means 50% of the students are paying double than the cost of education in order to provide education to these people. So enhanced cost recovery, I mentioned. Competitive research fundings, I have already spoken about the National Research Foundations. And then the biggest challenge is that the funding seems to have been linked to excellence. So if you are already excellent, you will get more funding. But if you are not excellent, you will not get funding. So it's a chicken and egg kind of a story, that you needed funds to expand, to hire more teachers, to have more classrooms, to have better labs. But now that will not be available. So you have to do something on your own to first become excellent, to be amongst the top 100 NIRF institutions, or amongst the top 500 world-class ranking universities, and then you will get extra fundings. You will get more autonomy, etc., etc. Another analysis tells us that these all NIRF and the world-class universities put together, they account for only 2% of the enrollments. So all A++ universities, all NIRF institutions, and all world-class universities in India. Presently, there are about 47, 48 of them. Not in the top 100, but some have reached up to top 200, and there are many who are amongst. So they all put together take care of only about 2% of the total enrollment in higher education. 98% of the students are studying in institutions which are of very poor quality. And I think we need to worry a lot about that segment of the society, because education and the quality education has been the only instrument available to the deprived sections to rise up on the ladder in the society and in the economy. So I think I have shared with you quickly, although it has been a very, very long time. I'm so sorry for people, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much, Professor Furqan Qamar. It was such an important session. I think everybody has been listening to you rivetedly, because I think this is something which is going to impact all of us. And so we needed this overview to be able to understand the philosophy and the impulse behind the NEP, and then what is it that we need to do in our own, university to be able to effectively implement the NEP. It's been such a, so you started off by saying that everybody's read the NEP, but I mean, considering that ever since you started to speak, questions started to flow, and I'm sure there are lots and lots of questions which are there in everybody's mind, and my mind, and everybody's mind. So we all look up to you to, to give us clarity. But of course, this session was very, very important for all of us, and we are so grateful to you, Professor Qamar, for sharing not just, an overview about NEP, but also speaking from your, very long and rich experience, which gives you a certain kind of a, position to be able to actually guide us and mentor us in thinking through the NEP. So I'm really grateful to you, Professor Qamar, and the fact that everybody has stayed on, and in spite of it being a Sunday when they could have been elsewhere, I mean, you realize how valuable and important your talk was, and I'm really grateful to you, Professor Qamar. And if you would, I know we've really eaten into a lot of your time, but I'm just counting on your generosity, Professor Qamar.
No, I'm available, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the people who, because speaking is easier than listening.
No, not at all. So there are some questions which are there in the chat box, Professor Qamar. So if you want, I can quickly read those questions to you which are relevant, and you can try to answer. Or,
please do that. Yeah? Please do that.
So the first question is from Dr. Madhu Malar from MCARS. He asked that, does NEP encourage fundamental research?
You see, it doesn't. If you read the text, it does say that fundamental, basic, applied, translational research, they are all important. So it doesn't say no. It doesn't discourage that at the idea level. But simultaneously, we are seeing trends that there are certain funding tilt to certain kinds of research. And either they could be ultra fundamental research or extremely different kinds of research. So yes, that is the apprehension that she has or he has is very genuine, because globally it has been realized that the research follows funding. So you can modulate where people would do research, so that you use funding as a tool. So if the fund is available for those areas which are of immediate industry needs or suits to certain particular specific types of needs which the government thinks. So now we say if cow is important, so you have targeted funding for research on cow, and so on and so forth. So the apprehensions are critically important. But then it does not ban. It says, rather emphasizes all kinds of research. Right. And in fact, if you read this policy with the Kasturi Rangan committee report, the Kasturi Rangan himself being a scientist and a space scientist, he realized the value that how fundamental research could be of extreme importance, if not immediately, at least in the medium to short term research. So no ban, but yes, the funding does have the potential to direct your research.
Right. Thank you, sir. So there is another question by Tawfiq Siddiqui. He says that students who go to countries like Ukraine for MBBS, obviously the reason is cost, not quality. Why can't we provide such medical education within the same cost in India itself? What type of innovation is required for this? I understand this is a very large question, but yeah, if you would like to.
Tawfiq is a dear colleague. Together, I think we have written one or two popular articles. So he is expressing the sentiments which the Prime Minister in a very distressing voice did mention, and that video is taking circulation, that छोटे countries में इतने सारे लोग जा रहे हैं. So yes, there is a capacity constraints in the medical discipline. People aspire to get medical degrees in much larger number. Limited And in fact, in medical education, almost 90% seats are in the private medical colleges, where it takes costs you about 1.3 crore or so. And if it is a management quota admission, it costs you even all the more. To get admission to an MBBS program, and for the postgraduate masters, it is all the more expensive. So yes, we need to create capacity in the medical education. Indians have been going anywhere, everywhere, wherever they have an opportunity. So they went to Tashkent, they went to Almaty, they went to Russia, they went to China, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, so many countries. Now some restrictions have been imposed that even before you go to a foreign country, you have to take some examination in India. Only then you will have the permissions to go abroad for medical education. Second thing is that after you get degree, when you come back, you do not get license. If you get an MBBS qualification from within India, that qualification itself used to be a license to practice. You just only needed registration with the medical council. But now I think even for India, they have to qualify a test. And for these foreigners, they have to for sure qualify a test. Some 2 years ago, I had seen a data that the pass percentage or the number of students qualifying these tests within India to become qualified doctors was very, very low. At that time, the highest pass percentage was 9% for Bangladesh, those who did from Bangladesh, followed by Sri Lanka. Now, one of these days, I read some newspaper that now the average pass percentage is working out to be about 18%. So yes, these people are taking a huge risk also. They are going to countries to get a medical degree, hoping that they will qualify the Indian examination to be able to get registered and get licensed to practice. But given the success rate being 18% even, there is a huge risk. Even amongst our friends circle, we know that some of their children who went abroad came, and despite many attempts, they could not qualify. So they are not working as a doctor. So it is a challenge. So yes, India need to expand capacity. Of course, earlier it was said that this capacity constraint was imposed by the then Medical Council of India, and because of the corruption that was involved, so now that Medical Commission has been replaced. Now there is a National Medical Commission of India, which has all appointed people. MCI earlier had all elected people. So that was a body of all doctors. Now it is all appointed body, so people appointed by the government. So let us hope that they will be able to create conditions that more medical colleges are established in the country. And not only that, they produce less doctor, quite a lot of our doctors also migrate to other countries. So almost 6% of the doctors in UK and USA are those who are trained in India. I mean, the persons of Indian origin. So, but that is also an issue. Some people say that that is a brain drain. My answer to that is that brain drain of this kind is still better than brain down the drain. So if you don't get an opportunity to earn with a degree here, so you may be a loss to the nation, to other countries, but you are still a big gain to the profession. So you remain in profession and you bring in brand value to the country. So Tawfiq Saab, I hope I tried to answer your question, but it was a difficult question.
Right. Furqan Saab, the other question actually, which has been posed, you've partially answered. So maybe I'll take up another question alongside that, because the next question was about resolving the issue of brain drain. I mean, again, a very, very large question. I'm not very sure whether one can really answer all that, but you have spoken about capacity building and things. But Dr. Madhumalar also has another question, that when a student joins for PhD, which requires intense continuous learning and research, the multiple entry and exit may hamper their learning and will not be useful to the students, I feel. What's your opinion on this, on multiple entry and exit? Though you've spoken about it, the advantages and the challenges, but, it is still one question. So maybe you can briefly address it.
You see, in any case, the PhD program doesn't have 100% success. We all know as a teacher that the dropout rates amongst PhDs who give up the idea of continuing further and then other things are there. But then presently when we are talking about multiple entry and multiple exits, I mean, you still can discriminate as a faculty, as a collective body of the universities, that okay, to which kind of programs would it apply and to which kind of program it would not apply. In fact, PhD has been also used as one of the arguments that the teacher's job should not be transferable, and a very valid argument. Government has been wanting to make, say like in the central universities, teachers be transferable from one university to another. But one of the arguments that was advanced was that what would happen to the research scholar? Would you also require those research scholars to migrate along with the teachers, so research would become a casualty? So yes, there would be a challenge. But in fact, in PhD, we have many more challenges than this one that you have mentioned. In fact, the quality of the PhD can be ensured only by the research scholar himself or by the supervisors. We are seeing many phenomena in our higher educational institution that students lack that kind of training to pursue independent research, independent of the supervisors. And supervisors also have their own limitations, which they have inherited perhaps from their supervisors. So I think these issues are important. The third issue relating to PhD program is also that in many cases, PhD has become a kind of mechanical exercise. That somebody has mastered a particular techniques of analysis, and then you use that technique to apply this to mechanically find out an answer without an applications of mind. So we often come across with research scholars. Third thing, again, our context. I recall one example. In Himachal, we were doing faculty selection, and a candidate came, had a PhD. His thesis had many lacunas, which experts started asking questions. That why conclusion is written first and the methodology is written later and kind of things. And that boy started crying after 10 minutes of interview. कि सर जी मैं जिस इंटरव्यू में जाता हूँ लोग मुझसे एक सवाल पूछते हैं कि तुम्हारी थीसिस बड़ी खराब है। भाई हमसे तो हमारे सुपरवाइजर ने जैसा कहा हमने कर दिया। और फिर कई इंटरव्यू में जब मुझसे ये पूछा गया तो मैंने आरटीआई में अपनी जो है थीसिस के एग्जामिनर की रिपोर्ट भी निकलवा ली, लेके मैं तीनों रिपोर्ट लेके आया हूँ। ये तीनों एग्जामिनर ने तो मेरी थीसिस की बड़ी तारीफ की है और कहा है कि डिग्री अवार्ड कर दी जाए। तो अब या तो उन एग्जामिनर ने हमारे साथ छल किया या आप लोग मुझे छल कर रहे हैं। So I think these are the kind of situation which we need to address. So anyway, if you think that people would leave midway, in any case, PhD people are leaving midway, particularly those who come with JRF. They think that, okay, if they have qualified JRF, they can also crack some competitive examinations. So they spend 1 or 2 years appearing for various competitive examinations, and if they succeed, they leave. So I think it has to be addressed holistically and is not necessarily limited to only this multiple entry and multiple exit issue.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. But there's another question for Dr. Mona Gupta, though it actually does not really necessarily pertains to what you've, but I think everybody wants to pose all kinds of questions to you so that we can get answers on that. So this really has to do with the semester system and the annual system. And so she says, so when we talk about the semester system, it is like learning a portion, appearing for an exam and forgetting it like delete button. But in a regularly yearly exam, one has to retain the content. Then isn't it like compromising on quality of education? So of course, this is not really within the purview of NEP of semester or annual, but I mean, any thoughts on that, sir? Any brief comments on that?
No, it is very much within the purview of the NEP. NEP assumes that in India we have adopted semester system, and therefore it does not specifically talk about semester system. Semesters and trimesters, they have been considered globally a better method. We think, in any way, we become comfortable with any status quo. So we become a status quoist. So we have been so comfortable with the annual system that we think that the semester system does not permit retention of the knowledge, etc. But if that would have been true, the Americans and the Europeans, where they even introduced the trimester, would have been the worst kind of students and the worst kind of graduates. But that has not happened. The real problem of the semester system is that semester system's idea was that, okay, there is a comprehensive continuous evaluation. What we did was that, no, you cannot depend on teachers. So you don't trust teachers. So in fact, in our system of the things, nobody trusts anybody. Teachers don't trust students, head doesn't trust teachers, dean doesn't trust head, and so on and so forth. It go on. The vice chancellor doesn't trust anybody, and then the government doesn't trust the vice chancellor. And therefore, you have all the checks and balances designed. So external examiners and so on and so forth. And then it defeats the whole purpose. The semester system is, in fact, the name of a philosophy. Not only is splitting the syllabus into two parts, but it's the name of the syllabus. It is not only about conducting examination twice in a year with all the same rigmarole of flying squad and watermen and invigilation duties. The one who teaches keeps on continuously evaluating, and then you trust the teacher. Problem is that since nobody trusts, so people come up with all the arguments. Like, say, I was in Rajasthan, so when I floated this idea of teacher-based assessment, so the whole university came howling on me that you are determined to destroy the reputation of the University of Rajasthan. And no doubt, University of Rajasthan was one of the most reputed university at one point in time. In fact, almost 60 teachers of the University of Rajasthan joined JNU at that time. That university gave vice chancellors to many universities. Many prominent names, so no wonder. But then I had done some homework and I started arguing in the academic council. I said, you are saying that your university has better reputation than the others. But then look here, the UPSC curricula, it only says that 50% from any university would become eligible to appear in my examination. So it means it does not discriminate between you and the other universities. So they treat them at par. Another argument that I had was that if this system is so good, so reliable, so dependable, how come that so many students apply for revaluation? Then they said, okay, the revaluation fees is only 150 rupees per paper, so everybody wants to take chances. And then I had some data to analyze, and I said that how come that in 77-78% cases, marks of these students change? So either the second evaluation was wrong or the first evaluation was right. So the feeling is that if you give this to teachers, two things would happen. One, there would be grade inflation. And the grade inflation has happened across the world. So today's 90% is only as good as 55% of 40 years ago. Not only in India, but also anywhere. So the teachers would become more liberal in answering the questions, in giving marks. There might be some instances of favoritism, etc., or victimization, etc. But then there are, rather than moderating the paper, which we do now, there is an idea of the moderation of examination, results. That you ask teacher that why is this students in your paper only getting so much less as compared to 5 other papers that he has taken from other students. And then when you ask these kinds of questions, things becoming more clear. So there are statistical quality control methods to identify, to find out instances of victimization. And in a selective cases, then you do a kind of review or the discussions. So we have to move towards that philosophy. Otherwise, neither the modularity would work, nor the semester system would work. There are many advantages of the semester and the trimester system. You see, how do you define your credits? Presently, the old system of the IITs, Qayyum Saab is here and he would verify, that was adopted in early 60s, that 2 lab hours is equal to 1 credits and 1 lecture hours in a classroom is equal to 1 credits. But you compare this with the European credit transfer system, it says that the learning is a function of 3 things. One is the teacher-led teaching that the student learn. Second one is the student's own self-learning. And the third thing is the peer group learning. So they would say that 1 credit will be equal to, say, 35 to 40 hours of total students' efforts. So the total students' effort would comprise of 10 hours of teachers, 15 hours of, say, self-learning. I mean, that is the idea of the assignment, etc. And then maybe 10 hours of intergroup discussions that also enables them to become interdisciplinary and to form a team, etc. Somehow, when you make this external, etc., these possibilities are not there. So change in the mindset, etc. There was a vice chancellor of the Madras University, Professor Sathik, he is still alive, but old age. So he used to say that when we were taught, and now when we are teaching, the way of teaching has become totally different. These days, every month we have a meeting that how much course you have covered. So he used to gesture like this, that how much course have you covered. So he said the focus has become on covering the syllabus. While when we were students in India and abroad, he would say that the job of the teacher used to be uncover syllabus in such an interesting and enticing and attractive manner that the student is motivated to discover the rest of the syllabus. So I think the semester system provides that kind of opportunities. So per se, it is not bad. There is no research to prove that it takes away people's concentration and retention, provided it's implemented in the spirit in which it has been invented.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Kamar. It's already 5 o'clock, so if you'll just permit, I'll take the last question. We've overshot by 1 hour, but I mean, everybody's so interested, Professor Kamar, in listening to you. So there's one question by Professor Qasim. He says, thanks, sir, for giving us an excellent overview of NEP, issues and challenges. Now, a student in a regular program can have up to 40% credits from MOOCs or online courses. At the same time, in online and distance education programs, especially in professional ones, an offline component is being mandated. Do you see a greater convergence happening in education sector with disappearing of existing silos in delivery of education? Also, NEP lays emphasis on producing global citizens. Can you please share more on that? So there are 2 questions.
I think both the questions are extremely relevant.
Yes.
The whole idea that students can learn from their teachers only is an old notion. A student can learn themselves. A student can learn from a wide variety of these sources. Of course, that should not be used. I mean, my only apprehension and the fear, and which I keep on arguing and often take bashing for that from the governmental side, that technology is a good enabler of learning and teaching. But if you will make the mistake of using technology as a substitute to teacher, you would be reduced to only consumers of knowledge. So yes, these MOOCs and SWAMs and so many other commercial platforms, and these days so many edtech companies that have come, which intervene between students and other universities by offering these programs. As a quality improvement tool, as a further enhancement of learning, they are good enough. But as a substitute to teacher is a bad idea. Another support that I can get is looking at the vision document of all the best world-class universities. At least I analyzed 40 of them across Europe and America. None of them, even though technologically they are more advanced, and their MOOCs are far better than our SWAM. I think somebody did an analysis that almost 70% of our SWAM courses cannot retain the fancy and the attraction of these students. They are so drab and so bored. Compared to that, look at the Michigan Open, look at the Yale Open, look at the Milton Keynes in Europe. They are far more advanced in technology. Every knowledge that they deliver in a physical classroom, that gets translated into a digital material. And they have a huge teams of people who do edit them, who add graphics, who add pictures, etc. to them. So they are far more attractive. But none of these world-class universities are targeting to reduce the number of teachers. So MIT had a student-teacher ratio of 8, and now they are targeting it to be reduced to 4. So they are using these technologies to reduce the teaching workload from the teachers so that they could engage more in research and become more research output-oriented. So one question that was that, yes, increasingly it will allow people to learn outside from your discipline, so there would be more convergence. But leaving all of them, for example, there have been some talk that now people can get their degrees all online. But there is something that has always been said, but it never happened. When Qasim Saab, you would know it better, that when the textbook publishing was invented, when the printing was invented, people said, now the teachers and the gurus would be dead, because whatever they had in their brains and hearts now has come on paper. So you just teach people how to read, write, and calculate, they will learn from these textbooks. But we know that today the teachers and the textbook, they are surviving simultaneously and they are supporting each other. Same thing they said that, okay, wow, now the radio broadcast would make teachers redundant. That did not happen. When the television came, there were a specialized channel by the private players set up for educational purposes. Z Education was one of them. But you know that that did not happen. Even this ICT, they are saying that, okay, all other existing technology did not have interactivity. Now this technology has interactivity. You can talk in real-time basis like we are doing. Yes, indeed, it has an edge over other. But, and now we have 2 years of our own experience of teaching digitally. But when you talk to your students, they all are clamoring to come to the campuses to that face-to-face learning. So there is something in the teacher-student interaction that somehow the technology is not able to provide, and we must not undermine this. One last thing I'll say, because question is asked by Qasim Saab. When this Black Plague, Black Death was so common for almost 300 years, 14 to mid-17th century. So every time the plague would strike a geographical area, the university would close, and the student and teachers would migrate to some castles or to some havelis, to something where they would stay. In fact, it is said that some of the best work that Newton has produced was in one of those pandemic time, when he was staying in his farmers' farmhouses along with his students, and he had carried his prism and other things along with him. But none of those castles and palaces or farmers' havelis, there was one name I am forgetting at this moment, became any academy of learning. The moment the pandemic is gone, the campuses came back to normal. Even within India, in the Spanish flu, they say that India's population had declined for the first time if you compare the census between 1911 and 1921 census. Ganges from Banaras till West Bengal was choked. Population declined. But even during that period, the number of universities increased in the country. Interestingly, none of the new universities were any way different than the previous universities. So there is something between which we do not know, which we do not realize. So it cannot be a substitute. It can be a good enabler for better learning, better teaching, provided you want to focus on teachers, quality teachers, and focus on production of knowledge rather than just becoming a learner. And if you just become a learner, even in the technology, we don't have as much strength. So if I have to get my degree online, I would prefer Yale Open rather than, say, Delhi University or any of the Indian universities or A++ university. Sorry, maybe I was not very specific in answering your question, but not
at all, Professor Qamar. You've been so generous with your time and with your scholarship and with sharing so much, and the fact that everybody's, stayed on and, they have been in this session for over 2 hours. And these are all teachers like us, and as you rightly said that we're all good at speaking and not so good at hearing. But it's been a riveting, lecture, Professor Qamar, and, all your responses have been so valuable. I think we all go away enriched from this particular discussion. And I think I speak on behalf of everybody that we feel that we still have so much to take from you, Professor Qamar. So I hope there'll be other sessions that we can have with you. I mean, you're such a generous scholar, Professor Qamar, and you're so generous with your time and scholarship, and you give so easily to us. But we're very fortunate in Jamia to have your presence, not just for the long experience and the richness of experience that you bring, but also the person that you are and how humbling it is, to listen to you, Professor Qamar. So it's been I really thank you, Professor Qamar, for coming on this platform and to speaking to us, and we are really grateful to you, Professor Qamar.
It's been a pleasure, Dr. Simi Malhotra. I'm privileged. And I'm thankful to the patience of all my colleagues to being present here for almost 2 hours or close to 2 hours. So thank you very much from the depths of my heart. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. And I thank all the colleagues who've joined us, and thank you so much everybody for joining this particular session. And we'll of course be organizing other sessions as well. And to everybody in the IIC, we're all very grateful. So now I can wish you all the rest of Sunday being easy and nice and good. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So Newton's house was Woolsthorpe, that was outside Cambridge, where he was in that place called Woolsthorpe Manor. I think that was the name of the house. Where he
the manor houses.
Manor
houses was the term.
Yeah.
Which were essentially like huge zamidars and farmers who had opened their houses and who could host large number of students through their animal dairy agricultural produce. So none of the manor houses are known as an academy, never became an academy.
Right. So grateful.
Thank you very much.
We're so grateful. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. So should I log off now?
Yes, sir. Please. Thank you so much. We're so grateful. Thank you.
My pleasure.